was earlier this year. Someone came in, a guest that wasn't here, but somewhere else. A guest came in having jumped in the lake that morning, and his smartwatch alerted him during the interview that his heart was doing funny. His heart was basically a heart arrhythmia, and his heart rate was all over the shop. And we sent him into hospital, and he actually did. He actually was having a heart issues related to the shock of the cold in the lake. And he didn't feel great anyway, but the smartwatch picked it up and did send him in, which was, you know, I know we're bashing smartwatches here. It was just it was one time where it actually did kind of work.
Yeah, so this measurement of atrial fibrillation or adverse heart-related events has found to have high sensitivity, which means if there is something occurring, the devices are actually very good at picking it up. And so for that reason, they're FDA approved actually for this, which is amazing, because these devices are definitively not medical devices. You should not be taking medical advice off your watch. See a medical professional. That's a very important caveat. But one of the concerns with this, so it can, if there is an adverse event occurring, which is why in that case it was excellent, it was able to pick it up. But the specificity of these devices is actually very low. And basically what that means is most of the time that it pings up and says something is wrong, it's a false alarm. Okay. And again, that's leading to adverse stress and people getting overly concerned with heart health. And again, to emphasize, this is not a medical device.
It doesn't replace your GP.
Exactly.
That's important to say. Yeah. Because a lot of them are almost marketing themselves as health advisors.
But that is a very new metric. Yeah. And the fact that if there is an event occurring, they're actually reasonably good at picking it up that's a big positive, I think. It is the false positives where we have, you'd have a lot of concerns because the people are already overly consumed by their data. And you said you had a friend who his life is dictated by the data that he's receiving. I would be concerned that people get overly concerned about some of these measurements like that.
So we're saying basically heart rate, all the classic GPS stuff, distance, speed, Strava, maps, and all that. That's kind of fun. And steps are the key metrics that we kind of like. And we know there's research behind it that if you're more aware of your heart health and your heart rate, that's a good thing. If you can do more steps, that's a good thing. And they're the key ones people should look for.
Yeah, and there's a few that have potential value. Heart rate variability has grown, it's been trending maybe for more than 10 years now. And heart rate variability essentially is a way of measuring how well your nervous system is prepared for physical activity or for activity. It's one of the ways that you get this body battery measurement. And again, one of the issues with this is it's indirectly measured, typically using the wrist-based PPG technology. But even if it isn't, even as chest strap, we know that heart rate variability has to be measured in a very standardized manner. So it has to be first thing in the morning with little or no movement, with no anxiety, with no conversations taking place. And if you do it like that in a very closed and very controlled environment, then it's quite reliable as a broad brushstroke. You wouldn't be looked day to day, which is what these metrics now advertise, that you can detect and very sensitively measure day-to-day variations in heart rate variability. They're not very good at that. But in general, the trends towards a better HRV score are reasonably good. Okay. And the same for something like a prediction of VO2 max. So in general, we say it doesn't really matter if these devices are valid. In other words, let's say it's predicting a VO2 max score. It doesn't actually matter if this value is exactly the right score that you would get if you went into a lab and actually measured it. What matters more is reliability. Does it sensitively pick up a change in your fitness capacity, your health capacity over time? So even if it's under reading by 5, but if that value goes up 2 and genuinely your physical function went up 2, well then this is actually a very nice way of being able to measure and track progress and changes. And for a lot of consumers, this can be a really nice incentive. We call it gamification. So when these numbers go up, everyone feels great. And regardless of whether they're perfectly accurate or not, if the long-term outcome is that you just do more physical activity, you're healthy as a result, you got a higher VO2 max, which protects against cardiovascular disease, well, then I would say that's a win. So for them reasons, I think there's value there, as long as we can have a healthy relationship with this data.
So what we're saying to people is you should have a smartwatch, potentially. It'll do some good. It's not fully accurate. Don't die by the sword in terms of the numbers that it's giving you. And the simpler ones for most people are kind of what you need to buy if you're going to buy one.
Yeah, I don't think you should get too caught up in the fancy pantsy measurements that you might see. Absolutely, I think it's a very nice summary. I think if you're an individual who's already very physically active and healthy and know that your lifestyle and management is fine, you're going to get very little return from these devices. It's definitely the category of society which are not physically active, that have a low quality of health, where we might see much more benefit for a device like this. But unfortunately, we very commonly see that the biggest consumer market of these is the people that essentially don't need it, right?
It's the Iron Mans and
Yeah, the people who are already very physically active and healthy and are aware of their health, which is very positive. And the device, therefore, is not really returning much that they need.
Yeah.
But for the other part of society, I think there's big value in having that accountability.
So as part of your studies into kind of social health and social wellness, is that something that you would love to see, like a government, I don't know, step counter scheme or something, where like lower socioeconomic groups get heart rate data and step counts or on a wearable?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and look, it comes with a number of feasibility barriers. Of course, with any of these things, you know, trying to interfere with people's personal lives and their own decisions can be very problematic. But yes, we do know that there are certain. Ireland, for example, has one of the highest levels of overweight and obesity in Europe, and one of the lowest levels of physical activity. Actually, contradictingly, we have one of the highest levels of sport participation, which is interesting. But it means that approximately 50 to 60% of the population are at low risk because they're physically active and engaging in this. You're absolutely right. It's the 40% that are not engaged, and they have no awareness. It's not on their radar how much this would value their health, their quality of life, their sleep quality, their concentration, their employability, all these different things where we know there's so much value to being physically healthy and have a high functionality. So I think there is value in a government incentive that deliberately prioritizes the low physical inactivity and the low health category groups to try and put in some kind of incentive. The question is, and I don't have an answer for this, is how you would go about doing that. That's quite difficult to do.
Yeah. I don't know. So just as you're chatting, I was like, as a concept, you look at preventative health, and preventative health's a huge part of what we do in the show here, and myself generally with people. That awareness piece of simplified awareness of 2 or 3 key indicators that people should kind of know and being able to work towards, and potentially it's something that we could look at.
Because there's 3 stages of this really from a health perspective. The first is awareness, right? So people it has to be on their radar. And the second is behavior change. So there has to be some incentive or intrinsic motivation to want to change a behavior. And devices like wearables can potentially be the link between making behavior change. Again, with the caveat that we know that there is this novelty bump where typically it does fade off and people don't follow through. The third stage, though, and the hardest one, is lifestyle change, long-term chronic lifestyle change. That's people can change their behavior in the short term and will commonly do this. Our biggest problem from a social health perspective is how do we get people to meaningfully change lifestyle, decision-making, physical activity status, nutrition, sleep quality that will benefit all of society, because remember that hospitalization rates will go down, the burden of public health will go down, as I'm sure you've talked a lot about these different social issues. It's that very, very difficult question is how do you create long-term behavior change in a society that...
And it's a fair question for society, not for all of society. Every client that we have coming in the door, you try to create that long-term change, and that's it. Change is hard, but you know, it's something that we all have to strive for. Is the why, and to have a strong enough why to keep going in the long run, and tech is certainly part of that.